Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Yeah, I'm testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Yeah. I know, isn't that cheesy? I know, it's really, really, really cheesy. I know, isn't that cheesy? I know, it's really, really, really cheesy. I know, isn't that cheesy? I know, it's really, really, really cheesy. Yes, and I can make this bigger. I know, isn't that cheesy? I know, it's really, really, really cheesy.
In this new legal cannabis market,
There we
there's
are.
so much out there to choose from. Where do I start? Teas and tinctures, cookies and candies, buds and vape pens, concentrates and oils. But wait a minute. This is medicine we're talking about. Start by reading the label. What's in it? No binders or fillers, please. Next, let's look at the lab results. No mold, fungus, pesticides, chemicals of any kind. I want my cannabis medicine to be pure and potent. There, I've taken the first steps. I'm on my way to choosing my cannabis medicine smartly. So what are CBD and THC good for? Cannabis contains many powerful compounds, cannabinoids, that help the body heal. Among them, CBD and THC are key. CBD is super good for reducing inflammation, and that's including back pain, arthritis, muscle strains. And CBD is really effective in treating neurological conditions like epilepsy, Parkinson's, autoimmune disease, neuropathy, and more. What about THC? In super low doses, you can't beat it for pain relief, insomnia, nausea, and what's more, CBD and THC work best together. I want pain relief, but I don't want to get high. THC is more. CBD and THC work best together. I want pain relief, but I don't want to get high. Dose. Go low and slow. CBD and THC work best together. I want pain relief. The goal is not to get high when medicating dose. So start small and wait for 30 minutes to see if you found your right dose. Not easing your pain. The goal is not to get high when medicating dose. So start small and wait for 30 minutes to see if you found your right dose. Find your dose for good pain management. Smoking makes me cough. Is there another way to take cannabis? The best way to take cannabis for long-term healing is through the membrane of the mouth. We want the whole cannabinoid profile to reach our bloodstream. Hard or soft candy? Let it melt in your mouth. Tincture, tea, or juice? Swish before you swallow. Avoid those pesky stomach acids. They're there to break down food. And they'll do it to your cannabis too. So keep it in the mouth before you swallow. Keep it home. Keep it real. They're there to break down, help it heal. And where should I start with cannabis medicine? Tinctures are a great way to start taking cannabis medicine. Why so great? Tinctures make it a lot easier to figure out cannabis medicine. Any other cannabis delivery way to start. Tinctures can be more precise in balancing the ratio of tinctures make it a lot easier to figure out tinctures as well as any other cannabis delivery way to start. Tinctures can be more precise in balancing the ratio of tinctures. You're on your way to a fast tinctures that treat this problem. Tinctures are more precise in balancing the ratio of tinctures. You're on your way to a fast tinctures. Confirmed by FDA-approved research. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. All information presented here is not meant as a substitute by FDA or alternative to information from your healthcare professional to diagnose. Please consult your healthcare professional about potential interactions or other possible claims not meant before using any FDA or alternative federal information from healthcare package requires no. Please consult your healthcare professional about potential interactions or other possible claims not meant before using any FDA or alternative federal information from healthcare package requires no. Please consult your healthcare professional about potential interactions or other possible claims not meant before using any FDA or alternative federal information. Please consult your healthcare professional about potential interactions or other possible complications before using any alternative federal cannabis delivery system. Tinctures can be more precise in balancing the ratio of CBD and THC. Use tinctures as cannabis delivery system. Tinctures can be more precise in balancing the ratio of CBD. You're on your way to the first treatment.
So it's Nobody wants to do it, but they'll do 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 Watch
THC good for? Cannabis contains many powerful compounds, cannabinoids, that help the body heal. Among them, CBD and THC are key. Cannabis CBD is super good for reducing inflammation, cannabinoids, and that's including back pain, arthritis, CBD, and THC are key. And CBD is really effective in treating neurological conditions, and that's including back pain, Parkinson's, autoimmune disease, and neuropathy, and more. CBD is what about effective in treating neurological conditions, and that's including back pain, Parkinson's, autoimmune disease, neuropathy, and what's more, CBD and THC work together, and that's I want pain relief. I don't want to get massaged. THC is an effective CBD and taken in the right dosage, you will not get high. The key is to microdose. THC is an effective CBD and taken in the right dosage, you will not get high. The goal is not to get high to microdose. So start THC for 30 minutes and taken in the right dose, not having your pain. The goal is not to get high to microdose. So making THC for 30 minutes, make your dose taken in the right time, not having your pain. The goal is not to get high to smoking makes me cough. Making THC for 30 minutes, make your dose the best way to take cannabis for long-term pain. The goal is not to get high to smoking makes me cough. Making THC for 30 minutes to reach our goals. The best way to take cannabis for long-term pain. No, not right now. We want to make THC for 30 minutes to reach our goals. The best dose past the stomach acid. They're there to break down food, and they'll do it to your tentacles too. So keep it in the mouth before you swallow. The best dose past the stomach acid. They're there to break down food, and they'll do it to your tentacles too. So keep it in the mouth before you start taking cannabis past the stomach acid. They're there to break down tinctures make it a while, and these are to figure out the dose too. And many of us keep it in the mouth before you start. Tinctures can be more precise in licensing ratio. Tinctures make it a while, and these are to use tinctures too. And many of us keep it in the mouth tinctures can be more precise in licensing ratio. You are on your way to effective tincture treatment that will help you. Tinctures can be more precise in licensing ratio. You are on your way to effective tincture treatment by FDA. Tinctures can be more precise in licensing ratio. You are on your way to effective tincture treatment by FDA. Tinctures can be more precise in licensing ratio. Other possible combinations for your the Federal Food Drug Administration practice science on other possible combinations for your the Federal Food Drug Administration practice science on other possible combinations for your the Federal Food Drug Administration practice science on other possible combinations for your the Federal Food Drug Administration practice science on other possible combinations for your the Federal Food Drug Administration practice science on other possible combinations for your the Federal Food Drug Administration practice science on other possible combinations for your the Federal Food Drug Administration practice science on other possible combinations for your the Federal Food Drug Administration practice science on other possible combinations for your
Can we start? Can you start? Can you start? Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome this morning to Cannabis is Medicine. Okay, great. Changing the narrative. Thank you. Our focus in today's program is on cannabis medicine and senior. Cannabis is Medicine. Okay, great. Changing 6 weeks. Thank you. Our focus in today's program is on various aspects of cannabis medicine and senior. Cannabis is Medicine. Okay, great. Changing 6 weeks. Our focus in today's program is physicians to cannabis medicine and senior. Cannabis is Medicine. Okay, great. very far away. Thank you for showing us the magic of the so this program very far away. Thank you for showing us the magic of the so Terry this program very far away. Thank you for showing more stuff. Presentation of the Terry this program type them up in the chat again. Very far away. So don't can more stuff. Definitely have a presentation of the Terry this program type them up in the chat. We have a slideshow for the video and more stuff. Definitely have a presentation of residents testifying. Cannabis type them up in the chat. We have a slideshow for the video and all of our offerings called frequently asked questions testifying about cannabis. It's slideshow. It gives a quick overview of what cannabis medicine is. The reason I bring that up is all of these materials, all of these handouts, quick research materials, the videos, the cartoons, all of this is done and offered to the public for free. So if you want to support our work, videos, the cartoons, feel free to give a donation to Creative Change Productions. So if you want to 501c3, it's a nonprofit, and that way feel free to do what we're doing, a donation to Creative Change Productions. So one of the things that we've come across in doing this show is that we have a technological hiccup. So for some reason, one of the things that we've come across of our PowerPoint presentation in the slide show mode. So I'm going to have to just do this sort of manually. You won't get to see all the bells and whistles of things animated and so I'm going to have to just do really, really cool. So the coolness has to be set aside and just concentrate on bells and whistles of things. So cannabis is medicine, changing the narrative through knowledge. I know you all understand why we have to change that narrative. So because cannabis narrative has been out there for 80-some years, ever since the U.S. government declared war on marijuana, has been a false narrative that has been perpetuated by the pharmaceutical industry, the insurance industry, the government in its various manifestations of its war on drugs, really actually turned out in hindsight to be a war on government, not a war on drugs. But marijuana was the top of the list when President Nixon in 1970 declared war. And this is what we're facing. We're facing a lot of misinformation right now. The public doesn't understand and is often afraid of cannabis. And this is what we're facing. We're facing a lot of misinformation. So our goals today are, this is what happens when I don't have the PowerPoint presentation working properly. We're going to deepen our individual understanding of how today are. So we're talking about the science of cannabis. PowerPoint presentation working properly. How do these cannabinoids we're going to deepen our individual understanding to cause holistic, natural, root level, cellular level. How do these cannabinoids work? Quite a different approach from modern day medicine. So we want to overcome fears and prejudices. We want to give you guidance so that when you walk into any dispensary in the country, you know how to read a label, you know what kinds of questions to ask the so-called bud tenders. When you walk into any dispensary, all of our dispensary staff and our patient counselors that try so hard in some dispensaries to give you medicinal information. You have to come in as counselors, and that's the real goal of some presentation. We want to professionalize our own industry as well. You have to come in. Our industry has been based on a certain subculture, beatniks. We want to professionalize in the 50s all the way up to hippies in the 60s and 70s, moving back to the land movement and subculture. So we're beatniks. We want to demythologize cannabis and the science of cannabis as medicine in light of those kinds of differences that we have. So cannabis medicine, we have written records of it being cannabis being used as a healing herb, different with all the other herbs that are out there. Cannabis medicine, Mother Nature, whether it's comfrey or calendula, turkey tail, mushrooms, whatever, all of those natural herbs are what human beings have relied on for healing. For records we have are over 5,000 years. All of those natural herbs. In 1939, the federal government outlawed cannabis as medicine, and the first drug czar, Harry Anslinger, declared war on those black and brown people. He was very out there about his racism, about those people who were bringing this dangerous drug to our shores to influence our children into taking aid and going out on the streets and getting addicted. So those kinds of messages started in the 30s, coming at us. So after so many decades of hearing that, most people are pretty much afraid. So those kinds of messages started heroin and other things. So we are turning that narrative around because for so many centuries, other things, we are turning that narrative around treatment for all kinds of conditions. I mean, Queen Victoria's personal physician had an extensive diary of how he used cannabis as an herb to heal. He particularly had an extensive elderly people with what they called in Victorian language a softening of the brain. He particularly used what he called Indian hemp people, which is what they called in Victorian. He writes that softening never did anything untoward or dissatisfying happen with the treatment, but instead, inevitably, they realized good and healing results for those people who became more focused, more lucid, and more able to function. So, you know, we have a lot of records of this, but in spite of that, we are facing a lot of scary information coming from the government. One of the people that perpetuated the scary information and was declared by Time Magazine information, from the government, 2001, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, the chief medical officer at CNN. He was declared to be a hero because on the front of Time Magazine he said, "Don't let your children go near marijuana because they will become addicted to heavy drugs." Oh, that's what it. Well, Dr. Gupta became a hero when he was invited to come see what cannabis oil was doing for a lot of young 1 and 2-year-old toddlers in Colorado who had something called cannabis oil, which meant that they were having epileptic seizures to the tune of 1 to 200 a month. At those early formative years of their brain development, they were killing themselves with seizures. They were impeding their development as little human beings. These children were very, very much being hurt by this syndrome, and amazingly enough, CBD oil is what reduced that 100 to 200 seizures per month down to 1, 2, or 3 a month. You can imagine what a difference that made for their mental and physiological development as a whole. So when Dr. Gupta found out about this, he did a big series about Charlotte's Web, which was what it was called. He then did one to 2 documentaries, 3-1-hour documentary, Charlotte's Web. He stood in front of the camera, looked straight at the camera and said, "One life to the American people about the medical value of cannabis." Not because I was ignorant, not because I was giving misinformation, because I was outright lied to by the federal government. It was interesting that when we first started Dragonfly Wellness Center in 2011, in January of 2012, it was interesting that when we first started Dragonfly Wellness Center in 2011, and in that website, January 2012, an article talking about one of the foremost researchers work, Dr. Raphael Mishra, at Hebrew University of Israel, about his discovery that the THC molecule, in conjunction with Hebrew as first land, was killing cancer cells without hurting the healthy cells around those cancer cells. Well, this was quite an amazing, it was truly amazing discovery, and the healthy cells found the National Cancer Institute's alternative oncology site gave a whole three-column article about how accurate Dr. Bashir's findings were and how it was true. This was actually true. Cannabis killed cancer. That article was up on the web for about 3 weeks, and it poof, disappeared. But the Pandora's box was opened, and people started to get for about 3 weeks to find out what was really going on with cannabis as a healing herb in relation to cancer. 60 Minutes, Jane Brody, who runs the New York Times health column, and then it just fell into place. More and more mainstream people were coming to the front and saying, oh, wait a second, marijuana, cannabis, not this dangerous thing that's going to lead our children just to heavy drug use. So Dr. Lester Greenspan, another one of our heroes, a professor emeritus from Harvard, he said this like ages ago. So it must have been the 70s, I think. I don't remember a date on this. Professor Emeritus said, cannabis, someday, it's going to be seen as a wonder drug, as was penicillin in the 1940s. Like penicillin, cannabis, someday, it's going to be seen as a wonder drug. It has a wide range of therapeutic applications. And it would like penicillin, cannabis, someday, thank you, Dr. Greenspan. So we have a change from many, many decades of misinformation about cannabis onto mainstream people coming in. So we have a change. Wow. Wait a second. We've been maligning cannabis for too long. So let's dive into the science. We're going to dive into the science, and then we're going to talk about some of the conditions that seniors face and how cannabis can help them in treating those. So let's dive into the science. So diving into the science, and then we're going to cannabis itself as a plant is comprised of three and how cannabis can help them. Cannabinoids, terpenes, diving into the science, and we're cannabis itself as a plant focus most comprised of three cannabinoids and how cannabis can help them. Cannabinoids, because terpenes, diving into the science, cannabis itself as a focus most comprised of research. Cannabis is because yes, cannabis itself as a focus most comprised of research is jumbled. Cannabis is because there's a feedback.
I'm getting it if you're overdriving. So
We'll take care of it.
I'm turning it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a feedback.
I'm getting it.
We're beginning to learn that terpenes, which have always been known to be responsible for that beautiful color and bouquet of the flower, they have to learn that terpenes, and we're starting to always been known to be responsible. But please note, we're in the infant stages of research, largely because in this country, research has been not allowed on cannabis. The National Institutes of Health, which research has been not allowed on cannabis. The National Institutes of Health, which, excuse me folks, we're going to find out what's going on here. The National Institute still there? Excuse me folks, we're going to find out what's going on.
Yeah, I got just this whole crowd of people talking in the background that we were talking about earlier. So that YouTube is not running right now. This whole crowd of people talking in the background that we were talking about earlier. So that YouTube is not running right now. This whole crowd.
I don't see it. I turned off QuickTime. I turned off. I don't see it. I don't see it. So we got a feedback loop on the cartoon, huh? I don't see it.
Except I don't have it here.
I don't see it. So we got a feedback loop on the cartoon, huh? I don't see it.
Except I don't have it here. Okay. Where is all that?
Anybody who's listening to the broadcast right now could put a little message in the chat box. Let us know if you're hearing a feedback loop. Anybody who's listening to the broadcast right now could put a little message in the chat box. Let us know if you're hearing a feedback loop.
And I'm hearing all of repeating this. It's going out. Yes, it is totally distorted and garbled and there, and it's clean coming into here, clean going out there. So that must be something I'm doing.
Is it still?
That must be something I'm doing.
Is it still?
That whatever it is, it turned all that off.
Let's continue.
Wait a minute.
Is it still?
That whatever it is, it turned all that off. We'll have to interrupt this with a count of
Let's
one.
continue.
Wait a minute.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
We'll have to interrupt
8,
this with a count of
9,
one.
10,
It's so delayed, I can't.
11, 12, 6, 7. My audio is delayed.
Volume's gone way up. So delayed, I can't.
11, 12, 6, 7. My audio is delayed.
Volume's gone
So why
way
don't,
up.
why don't we go ahead and play the video and see if we can resolve it while the video is playing.
We're gonna play the video, because then I have to
So
change
why
it
don't,
to a
why don't we go ahead and
different.
play
Okay.
and see if we can resolve it while the video is playing.
We're gonna play the video, because then I have to
So
change
why
it
don't,
to a
why don't we
different.
go ahead and play and see if we can resolve it while the video is playing.
We're gonna play the video, because then I have to
So
change
why
it
don't,
to a
why don't we
different.
go ahead and play and see if we can resolve it while the video is playing.
We're gonna play the video, because then I have to
So
change
why
it
don't,
to a
why don't we
different.
go ahead and play and see if we can resolve it while the video is playing.
We're gonna play the video, because then I have to
So
change
why
it
don't,
to a
why don't we
different.
go ahead and play and see if we can resolve it while the video is playing.
We're gonna play the video, because then I have to
So
change
why
it
don't,
to a
why don't we
different.
go ahead and play and see if we can resolve it while the video is playing.
We're gonna play the video, because then I have to
So
change
why
it
don't,
to a
why don't we
different.
go ahead and play and see if we can resolve it while the video is playing.
We should be getting your audio now. You can go ahead with the presentation.
Okay. How many cannabinoids are there? We used to think for years it was like, 50, 60 maybe chemical compounds. But now we're looking at 300 to 500 chemical compounds in this amazing plant. And these chemical compounds, how many cannabinoids are there? We used to think in the plants, other plants that we may use as medicines, they come into our body and they work with the cannabinoids that are made in our body. So phytocannabinoids technically is what we're talking about coming in. How many cannabinoids are there? We used to phyto being Latin for plant, other plants, and endocannabinoids are the cannabinoids that we produce inside our bodies. Those are endogenously produced. The cannabinoids that are and the endocannabinoids from inside our body we're talking about coming in connect with cannabinoids, phytocannabinoids, phyto being Latin for plant, other plants. And endocannabinoids are the cannabinoids that we produce inside our bodies. Those are endogenously produced, quote-unquote, cannabinoids are what are made in a lab. The pharmaceutical industry takes pride in trying to replicate natural chemical compounds, natural phytocannabinoids with synthetic chemicals. And there's some real problems with that. And we'll talk about that too as well. Okay, moving along. So what is the endocannabinoid system? The endocannabinoid system is a system like the circulatory system, the muscular system, the skeletal system, the lymph system. It's a system in our body of endocannabinoid receptors. And it consists of neurotransmitters that send the signals out from those receptor clusters to the cells, enzymes, and cells. So the endocannabinoid system, clusters of endocannabinoid receptors, neurotransmitters, and cells are throughout our body, and they are in all mammals with a spine. So there's no reason for the endocannabinoid system to be a mystery because all mammals have had them, but for some reason it hasn't been taught to our healthcare providers to even acknowledge that the endocannabinoid system exists. So how does the endocannabinoid system work? So basically, the endocannabinoid system works by the chemical compounds that are molecules come in and meet the chemical compounds produced by the endocannabinoid system in something that's called ligands. They connect and latch onto each other. And then the endocannabinoid system, which has a brain, it sends those chemicals out to the area of the body that is crying out for some kind of help and healing and resolution of some sort of distress, sends them out there to take care of that problem. Now, how does it know how to do that? Well, in the same way that the lymph nodes that are throughout our body know how to take nutrients and chemicals from the food that comes into our system and do the job that they do. For years, everybody knew, the scientists knew, skeletal system, oh, that's bones, circulatory, that's blood, nervous system, that's nerves. What was the lymph system for? It took a while, it took some research in the lab, it took some animal studies, and they figured out, oh, the lymph system, it sends out messenger chemicals to the liver and the kidneys, it detoxifies organs. That's its main job. Wow, astounding. So it wasn't until the 90s, 1992, 93, that the endocannabinoid system became recognized as a principal system in our bodies. But what does it do? Well, what they figured out eventually is that the endocannabinoid, through all the magic ways that science has of finding things out, which is good, this is what we have science and technology for in the modern time. We figure things out in ways that we couldn't do before because we didn't have the tools. But what they figured out, the endocannabinoid system's sole job is to maintain homeostasis. What is homeostasis? That's balance. It keeps all the systems in our body in balance. So let's give an example of how that might go out of balance. Neurotransmitters send a message to the endocannabinoid receptors in their little clusters. And it says rapid cell growth, rapid proliferation of cells in this tissue or this organ. Ooh, could be cancer. The ECS, the endocannabinoid system, sends out the chemical compounds to redress that imbalance by killing the cancer cells but leaving the healthy cells alive. So the balance is restored. Homeostasis is restored. Now, how does the endocannabinoid system know how to do such a smart thing? How does it know what to send out, when to send it out, and how to restore homeostasis? It's in our RNA. There's a code that helps our body's systems, lymph system, endocannabinoid system, all our systems know how to restore balance. That's the first step to healing, because when we are ill, when we have dis-ease, or when we have illness, we are out of balance. So this is the magic and the wonder of the endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system, yeah, I love it. If y'all will come back and watch when this slideshow is really working, because you'll see all the bells and whistles. But this is an example of how these the endocannabinoid CB1 receptors for the lungs, CB2 receptors for the reproductive system, for the bones. There's all these different receptor sites that are in charge of watching over a particular system in our body. Just keep an eye on it. Make sure it's staying in balance. Of course, we're always throwing things at it like bad nutrition, bad lifestyle, no exercise, sedentary, etc., toxins that we're surrounded in our air and water. So we're always throwing a curveball at our endocannabinoid system. And our endocannabinoid system is always coming right back at us and saying, oh, I don't care what curveball you throw at me. I'm going to keep restoring balance in your body. So it's everywhere, and it's amazing. Now, this is critical. One of the critical principles you're going to learn in this class is the entourage effect. And what this has to do with is how the chemical compounds interact in our bodies in a way that affects natural healing on a root level. And what that is how that works, what came to be called as the entourage effect, is the dynamic and the living interaction of these chemical compounds in the plant, the cannabinoids, the terpenes, the flavonoids, that work with our body and endogenously produce the endogenously produced endocannabinoids to kickstart, on a root level, kickstart our healing processes. So that's the entourage. It's critical, because what you're going to find when you walk into so many dispensaries is, distillates, here's a tincture, or here's a gummy or something that's just a single synthetically produced or even naturally produced single molecule, single chemical compound. Well, that belies the way that healing takes place with herbal medicine. That entourage effect has to involve the living, dynamic interaction of those molecules. Now, the pharmaceutical industry likes to say that it can reproduce those even better than nature can, and more cleanly, more purely, more separately and discrete. It's just not the way nature works. So they produce synthetic chemical compounds that can hook up with anything else to do the job. So this is something called the single molecule fetish. Nora Volkow said this years ago, the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Nora said years ago that pharmaceuticals were the best because they introduced a standard in the 20th century of single molecule medicine. Single molecule medicine. Oh, what's that? Minimizing side effects, she says. Wow. Well, you watch any Sunday morning TV show that advertises largely to seniors, all of these pharmaceutical drugs for this, that, and the other condition or dis-ease or illness. And then at the end of the commercial, actually there's more time is spent on the side effects, listing them very, 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 very fast. is a long list of what cannabis can treat effectively. And we'll go into why it's such a long list. Partly has to do with just naming things, you know. Okay. Okay. The CBD is the one that's gotten the most notoriety in the last 10 years or so. I mean, it's especially since Dr. Gupta had that wonderful, wonderful series of programs that featured the high CBD oils that they were using on these little children with Dravet syndrome, the epilepsy CBD cure. And what we noticed, we started about almost 10 years ago here at Dragonfly Wellness Center. What we noticed is that as people were calling me for patient consultations or asking me to come talk to their group about, doing this kind of presentation about the science of cannabis medicine, more and more people are calling up and instead of saying, hey, I'd like to find out if cannabis is right for me, could you talk to me about it? Could I talk to you about it? No. It was, I want to hear about CBD. All anybody would talk about was CBD. CBD got so much press that everybody thought, oh, great, I can avoid cannabis, which is a dangerous drug, right? And I can just stick to CBD, just a CBD isolate, and I won't get high. I won't have to worry about THC. I won't, this is the bee's knees. So this is it's a wonderful discovery, and the molecular structure was first found in 1963, but it was through the 90s, as I mentioned earlier, till we figured out exactly how it worked in conjunction with other molecules. And the CBD is an amazing molecule. And I will say this, as you're looking at cannabinoids, and we think about the major cannabinoids that exist, CBD and THC, if you look at a pie chart, most of the chemical compounds in the cannabis plant are little tiny pieces of pie in that pie chart. CBG, CBN, all kinds of THCA, THCV, all these different molecules. Very interesting. But a little over half of that pie chart, to our understanding as of now, is divided between two dominant cannabinoids, CBD and THC, and they work better together. So I'm going to talk about how can that be true. So this was the front page of a New York Times Sunday magazine in May 19th, 2019. It was called The ABCs of CBD. And what they did was they put this gummy bear on the front, big full picture of it on the front of the New York Times magazine. And it was like, this is parents' worst fear, a gummy bear, making cannabis look attractive by making it look like candy. So they played right into that. And I was very nervous about this article because mainstream media hadn't been doing that great a job at giving, speaking truth to power about the value of cannabis medicine. But this was a great article. If you could look it up in the archives, please do. It gave a very good sense. In fact, it used the example of a symphony orchestra and how it's a Perlman. One violin can be beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But you put it together with a symphony and you've got the entourage effect and more power and more ability of those chemical compounds to effect a healing response on the root level in our bodies. And they said that. The New York Times like, yay, let's finally admit not only is cannabis a healing herb with all of its chemical compounds, but you want all those chemical compounds to be present, not just one or two. So this particular, we're going to come back to this at the end of this presentation. I'm going to ask you all of the pop quiz. What's wrong with this front page of the New York Times magazine? What's wrong with this thing? This particular illustration. So here's another illustration, notorious THC. I cannot tell you, 90+% of particularly the seniors, but many other people as well, who come in and want some cannabis medicine for some condition that they're treating. They follow it quickly by saying, I don't want to get high. I don't want to get high. So we got to keep the THC out. I don't want to get high. People are really afraid. I think it's again, a function of mainstream media, what has been pummeling us with these messages of how horrible you could end up in the ER. You could freak out. You could be, like I guess it's like the old '60s days of jumping off of buildings if you take LSD. It was crazy making. And so one thing that we teach people in using cannabis medicine is THC is a valuable component. It works very well with CBD and the other chemical compounds in the plant, but you don't have to get high. We can keep THC very, very low in quantity, in the amount of its presence in a particular medicine, particular flower or a gummy or a liquid of a brownie or whatever. We can keep that THC really low. It will still affect healing results. It'll still have a good effect working with CBD, but it's not going to get you high. So that's very important. All of these things are true too. I mean, it's amazing. It helps treat PTSD like crazy. Promotes brain growth. We're going to talk about that when we talk about Alzheimer's in a minute. It's antibacterial. It's an anti-tumor agent. It's an antioxidant. It's a really effective sleep aid. And I worked at the AIDS crisis in San Francisco, and I never begrudged anybody smoking a little THC to get rid of pain, nausea, or get to sleep at night. I mean, it's just great. This again, take it from the horse's mouth. The DEA in a 2017 resource guide on drugs of abuse said no deaths from an overdose of marijuana have ever been reported. No kidding. You cannot die from an overdose of cannabis. And I'll explain why coming up. Stay tuned. But all of these things, fibromyalgia, epilepsy, autism, mood disorders, many things are being successfully treated to the point of actual termination of the condition or mitigation of how it presents in the body. So it's just an amazing herb. So here's our 5 rules that you want to memorize these and carry these around with you wherever you go. How to choose and use your cannabis wisely, wherever you are, from Florida to Maine to Tucson, Arizona to Canada, whatever dispensary you walk into, make them tell you about the product. Make sure, first of all, that it's pure and potent. It comes from a pure and potent raw material source. Whether it's a manufactured edible or a tincture or it's a flower, make sure that it's coming from a pure and potent source. Now, how do you do that? Well, this is where I tell you about the Emerald Triangle. The Northern California area of the world, known as the Emerald Triangle, became the featured destination for a whole group of people in the 60s and 70s who were who were part of what was known as the Back to Land movement. So these hippies returned from their religious journeys, their meccas out to northern India or Pakistan or that whole part of southern Asia where they would go for spiritual, epiphanies, and they came back, however, with seeds stuck down deeply into their pockets. They migrated, expats from New York, LA, Chicago, San Francisco. They migrated to Northern California to find beautiful farmland, to raise families, and to toss those seeds into what was the most perfect combination of soil, virgin soil, water, and sunshine. And if you stop and think about it, the whole rest of the country has been victimized by extraction industries. So whether it's coal or the fossil fuel industries, they extract and they leave toxins behind in the process. If it's fishing, extraction, and there's a lot of garbage that gets left in our waterways, dams built, and lots of other things that really hurt the fishing populations. With big ag, tear out the natural way of doing agriculture and throw in pesticides, monocrops. Don't polycrop, just one monocrop. Make your money and get out. It was horrible, the toxins that they left in the soil. Now, What did we have in Northern California? Fishing and timber. What's the nice thing about timber? It doesn't leave toxins behind. It cuts the trees down, sad, horrible, awful, but it hauls them away, and you're still left with virgin soil. This is what our Back to the Land movement found. And we ended up with rich, big leaf, gorgeous plants, so much better than those, we're very bamboo, thin, talk about that later, hemp plants, but we'll talk about hemp in a minute. So the source materials have to be pure, they have to be full. You have to watch what kind of ground did they come from. When I first started this, in 2015, I went to Las Vegas for a big conference of cannabis businesses, and the keynote speaker was Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader started his speech by saying, we will learn that the cannabis plant and the hemp plant, which are both basically generically the same, but very significantly different in certain ways, they're bioremediators. Bioremediators are plants that suck up all its nutrients from the soil. Now, when all these farmers who are starting to tear out their soybeans and their corn and their all their other products and throw in hemp seeds because they want to get in on this fast market, they want to make some quick money. What was left in that soil that they're throwing these hemp and cannabis seeds into? Pesticides and fertilizers, chemicals that we do not want in our medicine. So this is critical. You've got to find products, flour, raw materials, cannabis raw materials that are grown in pure soil. It's important. It's critical. I mean, what do you want to have in your medicine? So which delivery system for human, the next thing, the next rule, which delivery system do we want to look at for symptom management versus root healing? And we're going to talk about delivery systems in a second. Everybody thinks it's smoking. That is not the best way. But actually, I'll come back to that. Hold that thought. Delivery systems. What's the ratio of CBD to THC, other compounds? So this is where the work of figuring out your cannabis medicine is firmly in your hands. It's not going to be this blind, go to one window and get a piece of paper, go to another window, get some pills, and then take every 2 to 3 hours, take 2 pills. It's not like that. It's about how your individual metabolism responds to the herbal medicine that's represented in this plant and in all plants. So you're going to decide on ratios, you're going to decide on dose. And you'll have a base to start from. I'll tell you what that base is. But you've got to decide because it's not mechanical. It's not automatic. It's not formulaic. That's the main thing. So what's the dose that works for you? What's the ratio of CBD to THC that works? Because this is the biggest rule of all. We are individual metabolisms. We are all slightly or very different from each other. Okay, so delivery systems. Smoking, great symptom management. I had a bridge friend, Mavis, she's 92 years old, and she had a lung infection, and they were giving her antibiotics, and she was supposed to take them on an empty stomach every morning. Well, she would take them, but she'd throw them up right away. Well, this is getting serious because when you're 92, you can't afford to have a lung infection for very long, or you were talking about possible pneumonia, all kinds of things could happen. So I said, hey, Mavis, have you ever smoked pot? She said, maybe back in 1960s. I go, okay, I don't smoke pot either. For me personally, and I don't begrudge anybody smoking it, believe me, but for me personally, it just makes me feel sleepy and stupid, and I can actually do that all by myself. But I said, okay, tomorrow morning, we're going to smoke pot together, Mavis. And so I went over there first thing in the morning, she and I smoked the bowl, and in 30 seconds, her nausea was gone. That's worthwhile. That's worth a lot. And, we found when we were combating the AIDS crisis in the 80s in San Francisco, nothing removed the nausea that came with taking that AIDS cocktail or the pain that was associated with having AIDS or sleeplessness. Those are taken care of very well by smoking a little pot. But it's symptom management, not root healing, because in an hour or so, you got to stoke up again. So it's great. It's much better than opiates, by far better than opiates. But it's still a temporary symptom management. Edibles, not the best delivery system. Where in that brownie is my medicine? Where in that drink is my medicine? When you take in a drink or a gummy or a brownie, it goes into your stomach. And what happens there? Your stomach does what it's supposed to do. Stomach acids break things down. They break the food down to get the nutrients out that you need. It'll break the cannabis molecules down too. We don't want our whole plant medicine broken down. So if you're going to eat a brownie, let it melt on your mouth, because the membrane in the mouth is the best way to get those chemical compounds into the bloodstream, so the endocannabinoid system can make use of the chemical compounds and natural healing herbs that they receive, and then send them out to do their jobs to redress the imbalance that you're experiencing in your body. So the membrane of the mouth is the best. You got to drink, you're going to want to drink, swish like crazy before you swallow. Tincture is the best. Take it and put it on the tongue and swish like crazy. Swish like crazy before swallowing, so that you can get as much of that chemical compound going through the membrane of the mouth into the bloodstream. Suppositories are for infants, for adults with mouth cancer, for anybody who can't swish in the mouth. That's your go-to plan B. Ratios. This is the other thing you want to keep track of. When you're talking about neurological conditions, you're going to be dealing with a very high ratio of CBD to THC. Remember the pie chart we talked about earlier? For the purposes of this introduction to cannabis medicine, we're looking principally at the ratios of CBD to THC. We'll talk about some of the other chemical compounds, CBN, CBG, that are so good at helping you sleep or helping with anxiety. We can talk about those as well. But for right now, for our purposes, we're going to look at what is the ratio between CBD and THC. And mostly, that's what you're going to be seeing on the labels. You'll see some reference to a ratio of CBD to THC. You want more of the analgesic effect of THC, you're going to up your THC relative to the CBD. You want to kill cancer cells, you want to fight pain, you're going to increase your THC ratio even more compared to CBD. When we're dealing with inflammation, I was amazed at how much inflammation is at the root of so many conditions. CBD, CBD is the best anti-inflammatory in the world. It's got 20 times more anti-inflammatory properties in it than Motrin. It's a wonderful anti-inflammatory. I thought it was like mostly about arthritis, injuries, sports injuries, what have you. You've got inflammation because you banged your knee up playing tennis or whatever. But no, inflammation is actually also at the root of many neurologically based conditions. So inflammation is at the root of diabetes, Parkinson's, autism, epilepsy, and many other things. So when we're talking about treating those kinds of conditions that are at root caused by inflammation, you want to address the inflammation with the CBD, but also with lifestyle and the food you eat, all the ways that you can reduce, control inflammation. That's what you got to do. But you increase and decrease dosing, and you're based on how you feel. THC, CBD work best together. Oops, we're going backwards. So we're dosing THC for healing, not for getting high. The mantra with THC is go low, go slow. We use a little bit of THC to get the effect of the entourage effect of it working with the other chemical compounds in the plant. And again, it's not a piece of paper, it's not formulaic. If you're trying out a medicinal cannabis product which has some THC in it, and you take the dose that we recommend to start with, and you're feeling a little dizzy or high, reduce the size of the dose. If you're not getting the results you want, like going to sleep or relaxation from anxiety or whatever, increase the size of the dose just a tiny bit. Play with it. Find out what works for you. Um, we'll talk more about that. So we're gonna watch this video now. It's a wonderful video and it features some of the seniors on this coast who came to us with different kinds of conditions, and we realized such success with them. We asked them if they would tell their stories, and they did. And lo and behold, if we can get this thing to play. You've clearly got some tech work to do on this thing.
That video's not playing, huh?
Well, I think I can get the video to play. We're gonna try. Okay. Let's see if this works. All right.
Cannabis, or medical marijuana, is a traditional herbal medicine that has been effectively used to treat illness and disease for over 5,000 years. In modern times, we've been able to discover the science behind how this plant works. To begin with, cannabis is a natural pain reliever.
I saw the effects that Jan was getting with the high CBD, and then reading the article, I said, you know what? I want to try some of your high CBD. The problem that I was having in my knee went away.
I had a very, very sore wrist, and we weren't sure what was wrong with it. 4 years later, I was in constant pain, and there were just a lot of things I couldn't do. And so, anyway, I started using the cannabis salve just topically to deal with some of the pain. I also used cannabis smoked it, really helped me relax and alleviate the pain.
This is what is so striking. I went from being on the couch for 2 solid months. I was too weak to really do any chores. I had fog brain. When I went in and got my bottle of CBD, and it was in tincture form, came home, took it, and within the hour, my fog brain lifted. I was walking without pain, and I gradually got totally back to myself with 1 dose. And I continue to take it 3 times a day, consistently. This has put me on the track of being able to function. Cannabis contains over 100 known chemical compounds called cannabinoids. Cannabinoids interact with each other in a process called the entourage effect. This dynamic natural process is what enables cannabis to treat a number of unhealthy conditions in living organisms. In the past few years, the American public became aware of cannabis as an effective treatment of epileptic seizures.
We started noticing that he wasn't having seizures as often. He was, focusing a little bit more. We were seeing much more positive results than we have seen, on other seizure medications.
I had a brain injury from being blown up in 2006. It's a moderate brain injury, anxiety-induced. I have seizures, and I haven't had one since 2009. I had a severe one in Kuwait on the way home, to the point to where I blacked out for about a half hour. I haven't had one since I started smoking pot, and I've pretty much made it a life choice.
In 1963, Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, a professor of medicinal chemistry at Hebrew University, identified the main characteristics of the psychoactive compound in cannabis, THC. And he discovered that it kills cancer.
We started working on this project 12, 15 years ago, and it was basically by chance. We were working with astrocytes at the time, and we decided to change the model and work with astrocytoma cells, the tumoral cells. And we observed that when we treated these cells with cannabinoids, THC, the main psychoactive component of cannabis, it was killing the cells in our petri dishes. We were killing these cells.
Dr. Cristina Sanchez, molecular biologist at Potenza University in Madrid, conducted 15 years of animal studies as a follow-up to Dr. Meshulam's work. She discovered how the chemical compounds in the cannabis plant, the cannabinoids, actually kill cancer cells without harming the surrounding normal cells.
When 79-year-old Leela was told in summer of 2015 that she had a sizable tumor in the lower right section of her lung, she underwent 3 months of radiation and chemotherapy, but the tumor grew larger. With the support of her children, Leela decided to try cannabis. In spring of 2016, they got a new CAT scan. Brenda Childers is Leela's daughter.
Well, let's look at your scan. And he pulled them up, and me and my sister was there with me. And we didn't see the big lit up.
You probably don't need that
right side,
wind.
right lung.
Windscreen?
And
Because there's no wind.
we're like, we asked the doctor, where's the tumor? And he goes, I don't see it. And we're like, what? And my sister was sitting in the chair. She jumped off the chair. We both stood up and walked over close to the computer. And we're like, what are you talking about?
To reach
Because
up
I don't
his
see the
shirt.
tumor. The left side isn't lighting up, and lymph node on the neck here didn't light up. Nothing was lighting up. And we're like, you're kidding me. We were
So it
just in
does better
shock.
going up the inside
I
of the
couldn't
shirt
even
quite
wait to get out of
often.
the office. I had to call my brother.
But how do the chemical compounds in cannabis fight cancer?
They reduce their blood supply, causing cell
Yeah,
death
throw that
from
in.
the inside out, while leaving the healthy cells untouched. Dr. Cristina Sanchez.
We started to do experiments in animal models of glioblastoma, brain tumors, and we observed that cannabinoids were very important in reducing tumor growth. Cells can die in different ways, and after cannabinoid treatment, they were dying in completely wrong way. They were committing suicide.
Well,
When we started to see these anti-tumor and cell-killing effects on cancer cells, we decided to set aside our metabolic studies and to focus on cancer.
Even as a topical application, cannabis has had successful results in treating cancer. A patient we'll call Mary was treated for skin cancer on her forehead with a combination of burning and cutting the cancer. The results of the treatment are shown in these photos. In a matter of weeks, using cannabis salve, Mary was able to heal from the treatment and kill the cancer as well.
We've come a long way in learning about the health effects of cannabis as an herbal medicine. While cannabis has been used for 5,000 years to treat illness, it is only with modern scientific technology that we've come to understand how it works and how it heals.
In recent years, the hemp plant has been proven to be anti-inflammatory, antispasmodic, and antibacterial. It can treat depression, traumatic stress syndrome, chronic pain, glaucoma, migraines, multiple sclerosis, Tourette's,
nausea, and a host of other ailments without the unwanted side effects of pharmaceutical drugs.
Cannabis contains over 400 chemicals, with around 100 known chemical compounds called cannabinoids. But which cannabinoids produce which healing responses? Research into this question is still in its infancy, but in the mid-1990s, scientists discovered how the body utilizes the principal cannabinoids, THC and CBD, through a remarkable system of enzymes and receptors that kickstart the body's natural healing process. Dr. Cristina Sanchez.
And these compounds, these endogenously produced cannabinoids, were found a few years later, and it's what we call the endocannabinoids, because they are produced endogenously inside our bodies.
With the recent discovery of cannabidiol, CBD, a new frontier in treatment possibilities has opened up. CBD is a non-psychoactive compound with numerous positive attributes. It boosts the healing effect of THC in treating cancer. It is best known as an excellent anti-inflammatory, treating diabetes, glaucoma, arthritis, malignant tumors, heart disease, high blood pressure, epilepsy, Parkinson's, anxiety, and many other neurologically based conditions. CBD has been found to have so many positive treatment applications without side effects and without getting high, so that in concert with the other cannabinoids and chemical elements in cannabis, it has become the rising star of the cannabis pharmacopoeia.
I cannot understand why in the States cannabis is under Schedule 1, because it is pretty obvious, not only from our work, but from work from many other researchers, that the plant has a very wide therapeutic potential.
Will my healthcare provider support my using cannabis?
You go through a lengthy process of filling out form after form after form and trying to decide if you're going to divulge this medication that you're using, this drug. And of course, it's listed under street drugs. And so that was really difficult for me to do. And once I got to the hospital and I was prepping for my first surgery, the entire nursing staff was just fine until they saw that on my forms. It was all of this discussion and eyes diverted and whispering back and forth, and I had to remind them as I'm laying in bed and they've got my IV going, the patient is right here. The patient can hear that you're talking about her. The patient is a nurse and understands what you're saying, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not using street drugs. I'm using pharmaceutical grade cannabis for the side effects of all of what I'm dealing with.
Is it dangerous to use cannabis?
I didn't see any type of physical difference in her when she was taking all three of these cannabis products. She didn't act differently. She seemed the same, and she wasn't getting high, and so that was a big relief.
Well, they insisted on giving me Narcan anyway, so they did that. Narcan negates the effects of opioids and other medications that you might have taken, even if it's just like Norco or Vicodin or something like that. The anesthesiologist came in and they told him, and he immediately keyed into me and came right at me and said, oh, this is really interesting. Okay, so what are you using and how are you going to do it? And so I told him. Anyway, he was great. What do you have? I said, I have things in the car. I have suckers and I have chocolate and I have this and that. And so he said, well, this is great. And they had already given the Narcan. And so he was a little upset about that.
Myra and Carlos believe in the benefits of cannabis for their child's epilepsy, and they want the message to get out to other parents as well.
We have seen, much more positive results from, giving him the CBD oil, and, encourage them to just educate themselves on what they're giving their child.
Healthcare providers in Western medicine are slowly coming around to the value of natural healing with cannabis. It may take time, but eventually, with widespread legalization and increased research, we will see an acceptance of traditional herbal medicine.
2 weeks later, when I came back, their attitude was completely different. And he asked me immediately, how did this work? And I said, well, I only used 3 of these Norco in 2 weeks, actually in the first 48 hours. And I said, everything else I used was cannabis-based. My surgeon was not familiar, or at least didn't let on that he was familiar with cannabis use for as a medicine. And he was quite concerned that I couldn't control my dose. And so we had a little discussion about it. I said, well, doctor, let's talk about the prescription that you gave me. You gave me a prescription for 45 Norco. This is pretty strong medicine, and the script reads how. He kind of
thought for a second, and I said, it says 1 to 2 every 3 to 4 hours. Who's in charge of the dose? He just kind of looked at me, and I said, the patient is in charge of the dose. Maybe at the very beginning, oh, they don't know how this is going to affect them. They take one and it doesn't even touch it. So they take another half of one. Maybe an hour later, ooh. Maybe they take 2 at night because they just want to sleep. But when they're so constipated and they're so dehydrated and they're seeing double vision and their equilibrium is affected and they fall off the toilet at 2 in the morning because they're so dehydrated they just pass out, then maybe they've overdosed. So who's in charge of this dose?
Getting out of the Army and hating every day, like I've done a lot. I've tortured myself for the past 2.5 years with the opiates and working and trying to think that I moved on from combat. I haven't moved on, but the cannabis at least allows me to go to sleep, enjoy the moment, and just be thankful that I'm alive. Know that it's just as easy to not be here right now.
Recently, even the Veterans Administration has considered looking the other way when vets use cannabis to treat post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury.
On every level, from cultivation to clinical studies to patient treatment, we are in an exciting new era of scientifically informed herbal medicine, treating the root causes of disease and illness, not just the symptoms. Healing naturally without side effects. So many questions are now being addressed by patients, healthcare providers, and the medical cannabis industry itself. The healing benefits of whole plant medicine versus hemp. Using tinctures, salves, and other forms of delivery systems instead of smoking flower. Working out ratios of CBD, THC, and other compounds to find the best fit for the individual patient's metabolism. And figuring out the dosage, which has to meet the individual body's needs and responses. However these questions are answered, there is one certainty. Cannabis medicine is in the future of healthcare for good. I'm a firm believer in credits, but are we back on?
Let me make sure you're back on.
Am I back on?
Yeah, your audio is...
All right. Welcome back, folks. I hope you enjoyed the video.
Hold on, let me get your picture.
And
there we are. We're hearing you and seeing you.
are we good?
Okay, we're good.
All right. My apologies, folks, for our not having the seamless and professional presentation that we aspire to have. That we've had a tremendous range of technical difficulties today, and that's what it is. It is what it is. Okay. Okay. So, seniors are the fastest growing segment of cannabis users. In some ways, this is no surprise. I myself, I'm 71. On this day today, I am 71. And, you know, I lived through the 60s and 70s. I'm not scared to death of marijuana. I know it's not going to lead me into taking harder drugs like crack cocaine. I mean, don't I look like your typical profiled crack cocaine addict? I mean, this has been a real boon for seniors as we start to face health conditions that are particular to our age group. I certainly struggled with adult arthritis for many years till I used CBD tinctures to completely get rid of my arthritis. We all are facing things. We're facing insomnia, sleep issues, dementia, anxiety, Parkinson's, joint pain, diabetes, CPR, lots and lots and lots of things that seem to hammer us more especially after the age of 60, 65, 70. The other thing is that we've gone to our doctors to deal with these issues and these diseased conditions, this lack of balance in our systems. And we've been given a pill for this and a pill for that. I love to quote the Commissioner on Aging in Alameda County, California. Her name is Sue Taylor. And she says, quote, most seniors we see are up to 15 to 26 pills a day. I know my aunt had 46 pills a day she was taking. Consider, she says, a patient that goes in for, say, for example, high blood pressure. The doctor gives them a pill for it, causes the thyroid to go out. The thyroid pill causes the liver to go out. The liver pill makes your pancreas go out of whack. So the list goes on and on. So, and as Sue Taylor says, the most important thing about this is that the patients are not getting any better. They're getting worse. So we've got seniors who grew up not terrified of cannabis necessarily. They are facing certain conditions that are particular to seniors. And they are disillusioned and very disappointed with the pharmaceutical option. And the other thing about seniors is that we do our homework. We've got the internet now. So we look at things, we check on things, we do things that, that make our herbal medicine be an option for us. So CBD and THC are greater than the sum of their parts. Working together, they reduce inflammation. They have an analgesic effect that keeps pain away. Pain, when I went to I go to a lot of medical conferences. I went to one in Arcata, and it was a combination of Western medicine doctors who believed in cannabis and traditional healers, acupuncturists, shiatsu, massage, all kinds of things. Anyway, they came together to share stories, and they talked about how, you know, the body is an amazing healing mechanism in and of its own right. And understanding how these herbal remedies work together became a real, just a real plus for their patients. One doctor, Dr. Christian Lay, who I met up in Oregon, he had a series of clinics. He was a pediatric physician. He changed his clinics throughout the state of Oregon to be cannabis clinics, and he's so happy he did. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. This is a very important piece of information that is not being put out there very widely, but the British Medical Journal of April 2017 did a study of 446,763 people, and a huge percentage of them, over 61, close to 62,000 of them, had heart attacks that were directly ascribed to the use of NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So this is the other thing about NSAIDs is they can cause a pinprick size hole on the inside of your intestine. So if you've ever heard of bleeding gut syndrome, all those years I had arthritis before I got rid of it with CBD tinctures. I had to eat food or take some kind of coating for my stomach, or make sure that I was protecting myself, because I had bleeding gut syndrome. Blood was leaking out of my intestine into my stomach. It was upsetting my stomach with all those ibuprofens I was taking. So this is what we're learning, is that we can avoid the dangers of pharmaceutical drugs, because the bad news and the good news about herbal medicine, you already heard the bad news. You got to play around with the doses, you got to play around with the ratios, you got to figure out what works for your individual body. But the good news is there's no side effects. You can do no harm. There's no damage to organs. So another research that's been coming up lately is the use of cannabis in place of opiates. And I'm citing just one study. There are a lot of studies in each of these slides that if we had more time we would go into them. But there was a survey of 1,513 New England dispensary members. 76.7% said that they reduced their use or eliminated their use of opiates by using cannabis for treating their conditions. Most of them had to do with pain. There are currently 3 basic approaches in integrating cannabis. Now, allopathic medicine, that's Western medicine, that's the pharmaceutical model, they started to use cannabis to mitigate against the effects of chemotherapy for people with cancer. So, getting rid of, as the story I've already told about how THC particularly, but cannabis in general, gets rid of nausea. Well, chemo is horrendous in terms of producing nausea in your system. So to be able to take cannabis while you're doing chemo, so that was the early days. People with cancer who were doing radiation and chemotherapy they're hedging their bets, they didn't want to not do those things because that was what their doctor told them they needed to do. Well, they would also do cannabis alongside it to treat the effects of the chemotherapy. But also treating the side effects of cancer itself. So cancer can cause all kinds of pain. I mean, Kaposi sarcoma we learned with AIDS patients in the 70s and 80s in San Francisco, the Bay Area. Horrible side effects of cancer, and cannabis is really good for that. And then last of all, people are using cannabis to treat cancer itself. And you'll hear more about that. Roger, this is a good example. Roger was a patient of ours, 2012, 2013. August of 2015, he came into Dragonfly and he said, I've got pancreatic cancer. They say it's spread to the lungs. They say I've got 3 to 4 months to live. They want to do surgery. They want to give me chemotherapy and radiation. I don't want to do any of that. He came in looking for old-fashioned RSO, Rick Simpson oil, which is that thick, black, pasty THC oil, and he'd heard about it. He wanted to take it. We gave it to him, and he was taking 4 or 5 up to 6 tiny head of a pin size be quiet, head of a pin size doses that they was taking, and they said he had 3 to 4 months to live. And in spring of 2017, I ran into Roger would come periodically to Dragonfly and pick up his RSO. But I ran into him in the grocery line in Safeway in spring of 2017, and I said, "Hey, Roger, you're still around, huh?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, they can't get rid of me." And it's that it was the only thing he was doing. The only thing he was doing for his cancer was that high THC oil. We were so proud of him. It was really very exciting. Early days that we were treating cancer with cannabis. Diabetes, the CB2 receptors throughout our body are especially, they play a very pivotal role in the management of pain, inflammation, cancer, obesity, and diabetes. And again, there are many studies we could go into. Parkinson's, there were 1,881 people with Parkinson's disease responded to an anonymous 15-question web-based survey. 73% of the respondents reported that the medical use of cannabis for their Parkinson's symptoms, 38% of them said they never told their doctors, but 55% of them were taking a medicine with higher CBD than THC, and 30% were taking one with closer to even ratios of THC and CBD. Now, each Parkinson's patient presents slightly differently. Different aspects of Parkinson's will present. So for those who were having a higher level of THC, that was actually helping them in a way. It was improving anxiety, depression, tremors, but they had dry mouth, no surprises there. And they also had some more presentation of bradykinesia, which is a syndrome where movements of the body, particularly the extremities, may freeze or not be able to move in the way that they used to. So when we say higher risk, higher reward, some of the patients reported that they were willing to take the chance and increase the THC because of the benefits, along with the anti-inflammation that the CBD was presenting. The benefits of the THC were what they needed for their particular situation. For others, no, higher CBD and lower THC was a better solution. So Parkinson's, we have some actual studies of how that changes. Insomnia, here's a perfect example of how the individual metabolisms get dealt with, respond to medicines differently. This was, again, early days of Dragonfly. We had a woman in her mid-70s come tearing into the place. Her name was Mary, and she says, I can't sleep at night, I can't sleep. My next door neighbor, Grace, she sleeps really good, and she gets these THC suckers from you guys, and I want a THC sucker. I said, okay, Mary, let's talk a little bit about how THC works in the system. Let's just talk a little bit about what might work for you that might be different from Grace, your next door neighbor. And she goes, I don't care. I just want to try the suckers. I just want to do it. She was really desperate. I go, okay, here, suckers, take the suckers. But remember, and I gave her some more advice, and she went home, and she did what I said to do, which is have everyday detox tea on the bedside table. You can get that at any health food store. It's an herbal tea. So if you start to feel like too dizzy or too high, I told her, I said, look, you take a little bit too much of that sucker and you're feeling dizzy or high, well, drink a lot of water so you can flush out your liver, drink the everyday detox tea that you can get from any health food store, and put on an old video of I Love Lucy or something like that. You'll be fine in about an hour. And some senior citizens come in and say, I don't want any THC, I don't want to get high. And then I always say to them, well, have you ever had 3 martinis at the end of a long, stressful day at work? That's about what you feel like. So there's a lot of fear about THC, but Mary went home that night. She sucked on the sucker the same length of time that Grace did, about 30 seconds. She slept like a baby till 3 a.m., woke up higher than a kite. Drank the everyday detox tea, drank water, watched I Love Lucy. The next night, being scientifically minded, Mary sucked on that sucker for 10 seconds, not 30 seconds, 10. Put it down, slept like a baby all night. Comes in right when we opened the next day. She was right there at the door. I found my dose, I found my dose. She was so excited. It was a perfect example of how people have to take charge of their own health and how the herbal medicine is going to work inside their bodies. It was a wonderful success story. This, I want to say about mood disorders, there's a great book that everybody should get a hold of and read if they can, Anatomy of an Epidemic by Robert Whitaker. I'll say it again at the end of this slide. He studies how the pharmaceutical industry took the 20th century and crafted out every decade another approach to selling their pharmaceutical drugs. They started out being the companies that made the gases for World War I, the mustard gas and all of that. World War I ended. These companies had all this infrastructure that they didn't know what to do with. Oh my God, the war's over. What are we going to do for gases? What are we going to do? So they decided to go horizontally into making agricultural, what do you call them? Yeah, herbal, not herbal, but agricultural fertilizer. That's it. They became fertilizer producers. They did that for a couple decades. Then they realized if they could get in on human health, they could make a lot more money than agricultural fertilizers. So they started working with creating a new public image for psychiatrists. And they got psychiatrists to be allowed to come into medical school, and they gave them a prescription pad. And then they started coming up with the names of things that, like depression in the 50s for women who were tossed back into the home from Rosie the Riveter, well-paid jobs in the factory. So those women were given tons of Mother's Little Helper, tons of Valium, tons. That was like the way to get out of your depression. Then in the 60s, Prozac, drug of the year. For anybody who was having any kind of depression, anxiety, really life wasn't going the way they wanted it to be, they just flooded them. They came up with names for this, for these conditions, and then they threw these drugs at them. In the 80s, 90s, it was Ritalin. And then they started going with lower and lower aged populations, down to children. They're giving Ritalin to children. So I have a big problem with all these names of conditions that were largely generated by the AMA and the pharmaceutical industry. Cannabis doesn't recognize names. It doesn't recognize the word cancer. What it recognizes through our endocannabinoid system is imbalance, proliferation of rapid unhealthy cell growth, cancer. But they certainly don't see the difference between lung cancer, or breast cancer, or pancreatic cancer. It's not like that. It's very much more natural. So the presentation of these different conditions, whether it's anxiety, depression, not being able to sleep at night, those can be associated with all kinds of things, with pain, with diabetes, with arthritis, with all kinds of, with autoimmune conditions. So the herbal medicine doesn't care about the name. And which is why when we look at, to me, it's not an organic condition that just stemmed up when somebody became 80 years old and their kids put them in an assisted living facility. It's totally understandable that they're going to be pissed off, frustrated, impatient, out of control of their lives, have a good deal of sleep disorders, probably not going to want to eat, and they're going to be anxious. I mean, this is like, so let's deal with context here. Let's deal with what's really going on with the whole person, and cannabis can help do that. Okay, I want to tell you about Alzheimer's plaques and dementia, and I think at some point the word Alzheimer's is probably going to go out of use, but dementia is a spectrum. You could be anywhere on the spectrum of Alzheimer's dementia. But what started to happen a little over 10 years ago was people started, the researchers started applying some basic principles of THC to amyloid plaques. Those amyloid plaques that encroach on the brain, on the neural sheaths of our brain, and are the precursors and are what bring Alzheimer's to effect in our brains. The Salk Institute found in 2016 that there was a significant reduction in the creation of amyloid plaques by the introduction of very tiny amounts of THC. Okay, that's exciting enough. But in 2017, there was a huge mouse study at the University of Bonn, Germany. And they took thousands of mice and they separated out the young mice from mice, older mice who were exhibiting symptoms of dementia. Now, how do you measure that in an older mouse? I mean, I imagine it has to do with they weren't running on their wheels, they would stand over in a corner and stare in the corner. Maybe they left their keys in the refrigerator, they left the burner on in the stove, I don't know. But somehow they identified the older geriatric mice that were starting to act a little bit demented. They treated those mice, half of them they treated with minute amounts of THC, and half they did not treat with anything at all. But what they found was, over time, that the older mice started to be more socially gregarious. They were eating, they were running on their wheels, they were starting to behave in a healthy, normal way again. Here's the kicker. When they did autopsies of the older mice and combined the neural structures of the older mice with the anatomy of the younger mice, they found that the older mice, the brains most looked like that of younger mice. The older mice, with the introduction of the THC, were growing new neural sheaths, new neural pathways, new anatomical structures in their brain. Now, this was reported in Nature Medicine of May 2017 and also on CBS Evening News in spring of 2017. Now this, the researchers did not expect this. In fact, there's a lot of quotes from them. They were astounded to see these new anatomical structures growing. And the German government, they loved it. They're throwing money at these folks at the University of Bonn so they can start doing people studies. So stay tuned. I think we're going to find some great, great results using cannabis to treat dementia. According to the World Health Organization, palliative care it's a critical area of medical treatment of seniors, and both Tel Aviv and more recently some assisted living facilities in the United States, particularly there's one in Sebastopol that I could go on and tell you lots of stories about them, but they found nurses on staff who are willing to monitor and help patients who were agitated, angry, frustrated, not eating. They were not adjusting well to being placed in this assisted living facility. And nurses helped them take minute amounts of cannabis in various forms. And we had a transition in these assisted living facilities from people being afraid of those angry, acting out seniors to everybody getting along, playing bingo. There was more dancing, there was more music, ping pong, all of those kinds of things were happening. The nurses wrote extensive detailed reports on that shift, and they attributed it really particularly to cannabis medicine. So let's clear up some misconceptions here. No deaths from an overdose of marijuana have been reported. I already told you all that. Bears repeating. Why can't you overdose on cannabis? Basically, it's a physiological thing. Cannabinoid receptors have extremely low density near the brainstem. We do have receptors near the brainstem that right near the area of the brain that runs the cardiorespiratory system. We have receptors for opioid medicines, heroin, street drugs, alcohol, cocaine, all the things that you read about people overdosing on and dying from. There are receptors for that. There are no receptors for cannabis near that brainstem, near the area of your brain that operates your cardiorespiratory system. So basically, you could smoke, eat, imbibe cannabis all day and all night, and you're going to fall asleep long before anything bad can happen. So it's not possible to overdose on cannabis. More misconceptions. Hemp is a problem child because now that it's very legal in this country, a lot of farmers and former whole plant cannabis growers, cultivators, and medicine makers are turning to hemp because, wow, it's legal, we can grow it, we can create medicines, we can do interstate commerce with hemp, all kind of stuff like that. This brings me back to the story I told earlier about Ralph Nader saying, this is a real problem. Cannabis is great as whole plant cannabis is great as medicine, but we don't want it to come from hemp, which is a super duper bioremediator and is grown in soil that has had all kinds of chemicals, all kinds of fertilizers in it, things that we don't want in our medicine. The other problem is that there's an extraction process that is rather dangerous that many hemp medicine manufacturers use, and that's using propylene glycol to extract, thin the extracted oil that is extracting the chemical compounds from hemp. Hemp, if you saw hemp plants, you would see that they're not as full and leafy and robust as whole plant cannabis. They're more like bamboo shoots with thin lawn stalks and thin leaves, and it's just not the same plant. And like I said before, farmers are pulling out their soybeans and their corn and all their other crops, throwing in these hemp seeds into that same soil that they've been using chemical fertilizers with. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. So to recap the main points, cannabis is not a drug. Don't let anybody tell you it's a drug. It's an herb. It has no side effects. It's our use of herbal medicine is very much individuated. How our bodies respond to those chemical compounds that are in the plant are different person by person by person, but you can do no harm. That's the important thing about it. I'm going to move along because we're just about out of time here. Context is so important. So cannabis, it's an herbal remedy that helps treat dis-ease and unhealthy conditions and redress imbalances in our system. That's the bottom line of what it is. No side effects, no harm done to organs or tissues, but it doesn't work by itself. One of my favorite stories about this is, I think it was the summer of 2012, we'd just gotten going. A young man by my standards, he was in his early 40s, comes into Dragonfly and he says, I'm cleaning up my act. I'm going to see a nutritionist. I'm going to do all these good things because I've got a serious condition and I'm here to get some cannabis medicine to treat it. And I said, wow, okay, what's your serious condition? And he says, well, I've got stomach cancer, 4th stage stomach cancer. I'm like, whoa, that's a very serious condition. And he said, yeah, I'm gonna do better. I'm gonna really clean up everything so I can deal with this cancer. And I want some cannabis for it. And I want to get rid of it with cannabis. And I said, well, okay, but then he says, there's one thing I will not do is I don't want to give up certain pleasures in life. And I said, well, I have a lot of sympathy for that. I like dark chocolate. I like to have occasional wine with my dinner. You know, we all have our necessary evils that we are going to keep having no matter what. We do the best to minimize them, but we all have our bad habits. And I have a lot of sympathy with people who have bad habits. I said, okay, I said to this young man, what is the one thing you won't give up? And he said, well, I won't give up wine. I'm thinking to myself, okay, sugar. That creates acid. Acid helps metastasize cancer cells, promotes cancer growth. Not such a good idea. So I said, okay, how much wine do you drink? And he says, well, I drink a bottle a night. And I said, no, cannabis is not a magic bullet. Taking cannabis for your stomach cancer is not going to make it go away as long as you're doing other things that are promoting the growth of cancer. So it's context, Tai Chi, Bowen, meditation. Deep breathing is a good meditative technique. What you do, nutrition is critical. Eat whole organic foods. Don't eat processed foods. This is all part of the holistic picture of which herbal medicine is just one part. Hang on, everybody. Okay, remember the pop quiz? What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this slide? Can CBD do all that? No, it cannot by itself. And I think the New York Times article, if you want to look it up again, it's May 19th, 2019, the ABCs of CBD. CBD cannot do all that, but it can do a lot of that with THC and CBN and CBG and all the other minor cannabinoids that exist in the plant. Okay, so basically, cannabis has been used as inspiration for art and music and good sex and rock and roll and everything for decades and decades, but now we have the science of the latter part of the 20th century, science applied to understand how it works in our bodies. We can understand it better as the medicine that it's always, always been. So understanding it and using it, you now have some of the tools to do that. I want to thank you all very much for your kind attention and for your patience and your understanding with all of our technical difficulties. Come back to us in 6 weeks or so for our next program. We'll have all these technical difficulties ironed out. Thank you very much. Now, if we can take your questions, if you have written anything down in the... No, I don't have a text. Yeah, we don't have any texts. Okay, then. admin@dragonflywellness.org. That is our email address. Write me with your questions. Write me with your concerns. Write me if you want to have an individual patient counseling session. I'm here for you. Jude Tillman is my name. Dragonfly Wellness Center is the name of our dispensary. And we're here on the Mendocino Coast. Admin@dragonflywellness.org. Thank you, thank you, thank you.